It's really great to have you here. So, yeah, do you mind tell us a bit about like where you are at the moment, where you base, and also what kind of transition work are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's great to be here and have this opportunity to reflect a little bit about my time in Transition Town. So thanks for the invitation. I'm based in Tooting in southwest London. Tooting is a part of London, about 10 kilometres southwest of the centre of London. So that's inner London in terms of the size of London. Yeah, and it's a very wonderfully diverse area. So it's something I really enjoy about the big city is its cultural diversity. And at the moment, I guess I'm engaging with transition mainly in three ways. So the first, most local way is with my local group, Transition Town Tooting. I also help coordinate and kind of form and look after the London Hub, which is a connection of about 25 transition towns across London with others. I do that with work with other people, and I also work nationally with a project called Transition Together, which is supporting transition towns across Wales and England, also a little bit in Northern Ireland, and working with our partners, the Scotland Community Climate Action Network in Scotland.
Yeah.
So yeah, and previously I've worked on the international scene, but less so, a little bit in there now, but mostly in the UK.
Yeah. And how long have you been involved with the transition movement?
I was thinking about this. I think it's since 2012, something like that. So that's now nearly 13 years. Oof, it's a long
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah. And I also know that you have a bit of background in theater production management, is that right?
Yeah, I started my working life in theatre slightly. I just found it a really fun place to be. I wasn't really interested in theatre like Shakespeare and whatnot, but I found it a really fun, creative, all-in kind of place, and a place where you could learn a lot as well. There was a lot of kindness in theatre. So, yeah, I made theatre shows and toured them around the world for 15 years. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Wow, that was I know that was a really long time of engagement. I also had a bit of background in theater. I was
Ah,
the and I work as the director's assistant for the White Horse Theatre for like a year.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
well,
was.
my role was as a production manager, so
Wow.
the project manager of making and touring work.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was great working with all those theater people. They are like very bubbly and very active people.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and also like what brought you on this transition journey? What was like your first encounter of transition look like? What was the first conversation look like?
Yeah, I mean, this was a very key and quite profound moment for me in my life. I was working at a theatre called Battersea Arts Centre in southwest London. It's about 2 miles from where I live now. Um, and I'll be honest with you, I was kind of falling out of love with theatre making a little bit. It does. It needs every hour of the week. 7 days a week. It's sort of a high demand job, and I just had started a family, so yeah, I was just feeling a bit like, which way should I go? And I was fortunate enough that Transition Network were doing an international conference at Battersea Arts Centre in September of 2012, I think. Um, so at the same time as me having a bit of a question mark about what I should be doing, Transition Network were kind of in the building, and the organisation Battersea Arts Centre was engaging with Transition Network as well. So I was invited into a meeting where it was asking the question, what does a transition organisation look like? So, from Battersea Arts Centre's point of view, what would that look like for us? Because I was doing some of the early building development work alongside my production work in theatre. Um, and I went along there, and Rob Hopkins, who's now a dear friend, was there. It's the first time I met him, the founder of the transition movement, or the guy who came up with the idea and then developed it with others. And also, I think Ben Brangwyn, one of the other founders, was in the room. There was two or three people from Transition, um, and it was Rob who started talking about Battersea Arts Centre's relationship with its wider area. And in the conversation, I kind of realized that I'd been working in theatre all this time, but theatre was only one part of this thing we call culture, and culture is everywhere. So all of a sudden, I felt, my goodness me, the doors kind of opened as to what could happen next. Cultures in the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we present ourselves on video conferencing platforms, the way our front gardens are, our houses are, as well as our music collections are. It's just everywhere. So yeah, that was a very liberating moment for me. And I decided to do two things after the conference. One is do a master's degree at the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, which is focused for it's as old as I am, so 51 years on like inventing the new way to live on this earth. Um, and also, I thought I don't want to just study theoretically. I want to get active too. So I walked through the gate to the community garden here in Tooting. And by the time I'd left, I was involved co-leading a project. So within an hour, I was involved straight away in transition activity. This is the transition way, I think, to a certain extent, is come in, get your sleeves rolled up and get stuck in.
Yeah, and do you think back at that moment you were like, this is something that I want to do, that I'm gonna be 100% in it, or do you think this is something that I'm just gonna try a little bit and see if it work out for me?
It's a good question. I think it was more, let's try this out and see how we go. So I guess I reflect two things about myself. One, that when I worked in theatre, as I say, I wasn't interested in theatre as a child, as a teenager. Some people are just so passionate about theatre and performing and making shows that it becomes their vocation, right? I wasn't really like that, so I found my way in theatre and learnt as I went along, um, kind of following my nose, and just being present in the jobs I was in. And it was kind of, but then it ended up being a 15-year period of my life, right? And yeah, some really exciting moments and quite big events I was involved in. And it's similar in transition. Yes, I was trying it out, but I was kind of serious about it straight away. I was like, oh, if I'm going to try this out, like going into the community garden and getting involved with the project within an hour, you know, um, which we then delivered from September to December, that period of time. So yeah, I kind of dived in, and I noticed that about myself. If I try something out, I kind of dive in for a while to try it out, as opposed to just nip in and go, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't hesitate really.
Right, yeah. And when you first joined, do you have any like goals or objectives you set for yourself, or like for the project in general?
I mean, I had this big goal of working out what to do next,
Right.
in my life. So this is quite a big goal, right? And
Yeah.
how will what I do fit with where I've come from, fit with being a new dad. My kids were like 3 and 1 at that time, and I took on a lot of the childcare. My wife went back to work and wanted to follow her career. Um, so my questions were, how does this fit with this moment? Where do I want to go next? I was looking. There's this album I'll do a lot of music references. There's this album by an artist called Ernest Ranglin. He's from the West Indies, I think, from the Caribbean area, and he's a jazz guitar player. And the album is called In Search of the Lost Rhythm. So I feel like that sometimes, that I'm in search of a new rhythm, a new way of being, a new kind of pattern, a um, uh, um, new things to do and contribute to the world. So yeah, that was, I guess it was quite a big, but quite a general aim that I had.
Yeah, yeah, I think I can get it. And do you think I know a lot of people within the transition group, they are like working part-time or like me working on a voluntary basis. So how do you like balance your transition work and yeah, like you mentioned, the other parts of your life?
Um, well, initially, so I was at that time in 2012, like like I said, I was taking on a lot of the childcare at home. I was uh, coming out of working in theatre, started a master's degree, excuse me, um, and that was it. So I was very, very lucky because I didn't really need to bring money into the household. My wife's career kind of dealt with the income that we needed, and so I had a flexibility to what I could explore. So when I got in the master's program, when I got to the end of that, the dissertation element, I was really gravitating quite strongly then towards transition towns and community-based activism, and did my final study on regional networks. And I was just lucky that Transition Network had some money for UK focused work on developing regional networks. So this wasn't by design, and I got put in touch with a guy called Mike Thomas, who I've now worked with for the last 5 to 10 years, and basically was like, "Hi, I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in it being beneficial for me for my study, but also really beneficial for the work you're doing in transition networks." So I was very aware as a student not to just extract the data and run away. Wanted it to be worthwhile, but basically I can volunteer my time to work with you on this. And so we did a lot more regional network meetings. We did 11 around the UK, around England, sorry, as opposed to Mike was planning between 1 and 4, I think. So I could bring a lot of capacity. Um, and the other lucky thing was that meant that I did a substantial piece of work with Mike that was of strategic importance to Transition Network because of I can talk about this if it's interesting, but because of a really strange idiosyncrasy about England and the way transition has developed over the last 18 years. So yes, it was strategically important, relatively speaking, for Transition Network to put work into network building in England and Wales. And there I was very interested in that. So I've been fortunate enough to be paid in role for the last 4 or 5 years. So my volunteering goes towards Transition Town Tooting, and it's sort of a combination, some money coming in from London Hub for my time, but a lot of volunteer time as well.
Oh, that was really interesting because now I just finished my master at Bristol on climate change, and I'm also thinking about
Oh, lovely.
doing a PhD study looking at the climate activism and climate movement. Yeah, I think like my goal was to because this is something I really enjoy doing, like the community work against climate crisis, and I want to approach it
Hmm.
not just as a like a student or like a volunteer or activist, but also as a researcher. Yeah, so yeah, I think I get what you mean. Yeah. And yeah, because I know you are also working at network building, looking at how we're going to build the connections, how we're going to have like democratic or participatory pattern within the connection between different projects. I'm wondering why you have interest in working on the connection and communication.
In terms of network building, particularly, why do I have an interest in that? Hmm.
Like maybe about like what do you think is important to work on? For example, you mentioned the non-hierarchical structure within the organization.
Yeah, I think for me there's a few answers to this question, and the first one is about sharing power. So yeah, I think I want to talk about sharing power, resilience, uh, and the idea of a bigger picture or like a tapestry of change. So I'll try and remember them. So power sharing. I think England and working mostly in England is really interesting in terms of power because there's a whole load of different things going on. One thing is our colonial past. So this idea of Britain being one of in the not very proudly in the top three, like World Cup winning colonialism. Um, uh, and so now I think where more and more people who perhaps more and more people in this country are sort of recognizing that. So there's a question about what Englishness is or what Britishness is if you engage with decolonization, if you admit you don't know everything about that past, but you sort of recognize um, that it was really really bad, in so many ways. That the country I was born in was a protagonist in colonialization. So then we look at that in terms of our activism and how the UK scene is set up, and a lot of the the UK has a very healthy, relatively speaking, charity sector, in my opinion. So the idea of charitable giving, so people give away their items, they give away money, and the charity sector is money goes in and gets redistributed and whatnot. In theory, it's a good thing, but I believe it's a bit of a trap, and it's a trap because yes, it's great to have funding from that source and have the ability to get that funding. But for example, when we look at power becomes centered in projects where that resource goes. So Transition Together, it's been a great project with lots of amazing impact and outcomes, but we've been a coordinating team of 6 or 8 people giving services to broadcasting out from it's the hub and spokes model of network building. And for me, that relational piece and shared governance piece is all about how do we move from that hub and spokes to being more of a mycelial network, if you like, of connections across the country where we share decision making and we see the value of connecting together, and people can move from one place right into the perhaps holding an accountability around a project area for everybody and move back again. And there's a porosity of all of those things. It's very hard work getting to that place, and we're in the middle of making that change happen in England and Wales. So that's really interesting to me. How we share power effectively is really fascinating. Uh, Resilience was the second one, wasn't it? And you must stop me if this gets too detailed or too into the down the rabbit hole. You
No,
must stop.
it's
But
perfect. Yeah.
great. So resilience is another one. So I sort of critiqued the charity sector model and said it's a bit of a trap a second ago. And what I mean by that is it's really great when you are awarded funding, right? Goodness me, we can do lots with this now. That's fantastic. And if you're lucky, that funding has been awarded very much in tune with what you want to do. So you haven't gone chasing for the funding and creating projects to win that funding. Does that make sense? You're doing what you do, and it matches what a funder wants to give money for, resource for. So you have this flush of energy and resource and people and time. That's a great thing. We're living in the current system that requires money, right? So it's a great thing being able to resource things. The problem comes when that money runs out. When you get to they're often short-term projects that are funded, and when you get to the end of the funding, you kind of drop off the end of it, sometimes back to zero, back to voluntary, completely voluntary. So that boom and bust model of funding is a real blessing and a curse. It's two-sided. So I'm really interested in terms of shared governance about how we create more resilient systems where we think of not monetary resource, but resources more widely. And we think about how the value we get from being part of a network and perhaps the money needed to keep that network going coming from lots of different sources, lots of different places, perhaps because people think, actually, I really value being part of this and I get a lot out of it, or my group gets a lot out of it. So yes, we can pay into that or whatever. Lots of different models of resourcing would be really important for that onward resilience. But beyond that, more the intrinsic call, if you like, to be part of a network. And that's because of this third reason that really interests me. Transition towns, like lots of other things, are wonderful for localized grassroots action, right? Even if, and I will always say this, even if you live in a very small place, and for example, there's a train station in that place, and you tend and grow food in a small garden by the train station, and people who are coming and going every day can pick some herbs and cook their dinner with it, and that makes a connection, creates some green space, pollination, the whole beauty of cooking and sharing food. It does something good for your town. I would say, well done. That is amazing. Really fantastic. And from there, local action can grow into lots of different things. As you can see on Transition Network site, on Transition Together's site, you can see the projects perhaps being amplified there. But if we are reinventing the system, which I think that is the work, we are reinventing the system while this current one crumbles. I think it's as big as that, this work. Then coming together in networks is so, so important to feel part of this bigger picture for change. And the reason for that is that we share what we're doing, the skills that we have, the projects that are really worthwhile. We get the opportunity to multiply them. We get the support that we need. It's sometimes really lonely being an activist in an area, right? If you might be the only person or be part of a small group and think, oh my goodness me. So you get lots and lots of support if you're part of a network, and you can communicate your stories more effectively and more widely. So there's a whole load of reasons, they're just three, to start coming together as networks and then amplifying that change. Yeah, I mean, so I'm really, really passionate about the network creation side of things. And I think from network we get to movement. That's my personal opinion. And I think in England and Wales we're talking about network building at the moment to create the conditions to build a movement, which is something different. It conjures something different in the imagination, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's for me, like based on what I've heard, it sounds like it's really easy to connect different projects together. I'm wondering, is it really that easy in practice? I know that you've been running some sessions, for example, in one of the sessions in Liverpool, doing the kind of like invite the people who are in that session to like map out the project that are running in Liverpool and have maybe people at the center talking to people at the outer cycle. Do you think? And so I'm wondering, like, how do you work on the connections? Is it easy? Is it hard?
So the the easy bit, I think, is when you get people in the room, whether it's a virtual room or a physical room. Um, I mean, this is a generalism. Someone could have a bad time on a day like that, but 99% of people will come away feeling really re-energized, super connected. They would have learned something. They would take a connection away to follow up on later. They would have learned, yeah, learned. They would have learned something. Um, they would have shared something from there, so they'll feel self-value. So once they're in the room, I find it relatively easy to think about how to facilitate that space. Um, the difficulty comes for me, which is which is kind of a mystery to me, to be honest with you, because I feel it so strongly in my heart, but I understand it in my head, which is this thing of saying, "Hey, I know you're working on all your local action, but come over and hang out with us for an afternoon, or for a day, or for 2 days. Sometimes we do larger events over 2 days, but come and join us on this webinar on a Tuesday night." And it seems to be quite difficult, as I say, in my head I understand it, for people to value that, to take that step and go, yes, I'll come into there with an open heart, and um, uh, I will contribute and listen well, and so on and so forth, and this is worth my while doing. A lot of local activists are just feel like they need to do everything, and they're very, 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 very busy. So they feel like, oh, this is just an extra thing. Whereas actually, I would argue that those network meetings done well and done at the right regularity. So, you can't be doing this every week. That's too much. But finding the sweet spot where you are of regularity, I would say they would help everything that you're doing. So they're like a oxygen to you in terms of the energy. I'm really sorry. I'm going to say this. There's a term in Mandarin, qi, right? We were talking
Yeah.
about Tai Chi earlier, but Qi,
Right.
and I understand it as this general term for energy, for the air we breathe, but you talk about weather Qi, don't you? Or Qi from your grandparents. All of these
Yes,
different ways to understand.
like a flow, like very fluid sense of energy. Yes.
Yeah, and it has qualifications to it to make, and the way you speak about it means you're speaking about it in different ways. It's a bit like this, like when you get together in networks, you get all the chi that you need, if you'll forgive me, using a Mandarin term, but all the chi that you need for your transition activity, whatever you need, that could just be stories, could be getting your voice heard, hearing from other people, just feeling connected, could be good food, could be a break, all of these different ways. So once people are in the room, it's quite easy, I think. But you do also need to think over time about that strategic connection, that kind of flow of how you are meeting over time, and whether, keeping value and keeping talking to people about what they would like to see in those network moments and what a network can do for them. Sometimes really practical stuff. But yeah, that's an answer. I'm really sorry for bringing chi into the conversation. I may have a very poor understanding of it.
No, no, it's perfect. I think it like perfectly described like how the energy flows. Yes, and also a bit on the network building. So you mentioned earlier, like network building is kind of the prerequisite for a bigger movement. So maybe like, can you imagine what? So for example, your project, what do you see it goes in 10 years time, or how do you see the transition movement goes in 10 years time? Do you think it's going to be like bigger, it's going to have more like political relevance?
Yes, good question. That was a cheeky extra question there. Um, in 10 years' time, goodness me, so much is changing in the world so quickly, isn't it? 10 years is a long, long time span. I mean, this is just my view, but I think transition and the kind of world of grassroots activism, so not only transition, but the other, people kind of connect to community activism in different ways, and, whatever suits them. But transition, I think, will have a part to play in 10 years' time. And I think, um, yeah, I think local action will grow over over those 10 years. I think we'll have a stronger network. And then I think the conditions to create a movement or significant political change, for example, uh, is there's so many factors that come into that. I think it's really difficult to kind of predict into that. There was one thing I learned in my masters, which is it's a point of view, albeit studied point of view. I can't remember who talked into this. It might be Eleanor Ostrom. The idea of the only change that ever happens is incremental change, is bit by bit change. Um, but this really helps me in terms of community activism and transition towns work, because you think, oh, this is a long game. And despite all of the science, and I completely believe the urgency of the climate crisis and also the urgency of many other crises, in the UK, there's a growing gap between rich and poor. Um, uh, Crises of the past in terms of the multiple systems of oppression that are alive in society at any one time. All of these crises are really urgent, and I think a lot of activists um, have a lot of anxiety about the urgency of the crises, and yet we have to um, make the change happen over time, over a long period of time. So this is one of the dichotomies of this work. Um, you might understand it as a tension, urgency over patience. Um, and I think I've found myself, so if I think 10 years down the road, I think this is my life's work. So this is what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And in 10 years, I'll still be there doing it. And I would love to see a change where there is more power given over. Actually, the thing I would say is there's more power given over to communities in local, what he talks about political change. There's more power given to local community voice in terms of our local politics, whether it's our local authority or whether it's with in the UK, our member of parliament who then sits in the National Assembly in in Westminster. Um, yeah, I would love to see in 10 years' time more community, more power given to communities and community voice. Um, I think it's missing at the moment. It's really missing, even in established democracies.
Yeah, yeah, I think definitely like if the community they have more power, they can have like more like ownership, like belonging to the community they are part of, and to create something that is kind of like decolonized of the like the dominant patterns. And yeah, you also mentioned the kind of worrying feeling about the climate crisis. Do you think you are doing the transition work out of this anxiety, or it's more about like hope, in like the imagination and community doing together?
Yeah, it's not for me. I can't be in the anxiety place. It makes me do nothing. That's how I react to that. So when Extinction Rebellion were um, doing more direct action in the UK and elsewhere as well, and that became, the spin-off groups from that, Just Stop Oil, Insulate Britain, who were overtly direct action. Um, I totally understood where that was coming from, um, but I can't like root my activism in that place of anxiety. I find it very negative and gets me towards burnout really really quickly. So there's this thing, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Rob, or he might have just said it a lot. Transition is hope with its sleeves rolled up. So this combination of like hope, as in a positive, I guess, a positive outlook. We will make this change, right? But getting your sleeves rolled up and getting stuck in, right? Let's go. Let's do it. Um, yeah, and also I would add to that, doing it with humility. So there's so much learning for anyone who steps into this scene, and I mean personal learning and personal growth. So um, uh, I would fully acknowledge my personal state of privilege in the current system in the UK. And so I've learned so much about what it's like for people who aren't like me to step into places of activism. I could very well say, let's get our sleeves rolled up, and if we lived next door to each other, then let's go and guerrilla garden that bit on the high street. Just we'll plant it up and we'll turn it into a community. We don't need to wait for anyone's permission. We'll just go ahead and do it. That I would feel fine doing that if that's what we wanted to do, but I totally understand that other people would be like, I don't feel fine doing this. It's too risky for me because of who I am in the current system. So yes, this hope with its sleeves rolled up, that's definitely where my energy comes from, and from a positive change place, from a place of fun and celebration. But my friend Joe Dugan, who's based in Crystal Palace just down the road, calls transition serious fun. So this combination of seriousness and fun is so important to acknowledge. And yeah, Joe's a great guy, and has a way with words. Published poet as well, but has a way with words. And he coined something very important there, which is that idea of, yes, my nourishment comes from fun and hope and imagination, but I do take the work very very seriously. It is big work. Yeah, but I can't see that changing. I can't see my. You have to do it with a smile, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and but I heard a lot of people who are like supporting this kind of narrative around collapse and climate crisis, saying that if a tree falls in the forest and nobody would even know about it, so they need to make some big movement. But I do think that, so you mentioned fun earlier, so I think fun, hope, they are something that draws people more to a common cause than any other like negative feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And if you are thinking of doing an event, we did this event in Transition Tooting. It was called the Tour de Tooting, so inspired by the Tour de France. And it was one of the things of thinking before this call of a project that I've just found so great to be involved in. And what it was inviting anyone in Tooting, in the area I live, to bring the wheels in their life. So it's a grand celebration of all the wheels in your life. So if you rode a bicycle, come down on your bicycle. If you're in a wheelchair, come in your wheelchair. If you were a child and you had a scooter, come on your scooter. Your pushchair if you're a baby, you know. And what we're going to do is close the roads in Tooting and parade around the roads. And then we're going to have a sharing picnic and community feast on fish ponds, playing fields, this green space. And people came down. My favorite was there was two of my friends who came on a tandem, you know, a two-person bicycle, and they were dressed as trout, as the fish trout. Why, I don't know, but it was just glorious, right? And people came from all over. We had about 200 people in this parade around town. Um, uh, and the project at its heart was all about transport, sustainable transport and active travel. That's what it was about. But it was done in such a gleeful way, such a colourful, expressive, creative way. We went along the way. We were collecting good wishes. So people who clapped, gave us a thumbs up, smiled. We would smile back or give them, and we would count them on a chalkboard. You know, there's another good energy, back to good energy, right? So there's some good energy. So we're going around collecting all this good energy and goodwill from around the town. Um, but yeah, it was a conversation about transport. You know, that's what it was.
Oh, that makes me want to be part of this. It feels like a celebration, like a festival almost.
Yes.
Yeah, probably like looking back to your like 13 years of work with transition, what is the, would you say is the proudest moment for you?
I think it's a really small, proudest moment. I think it's about still being here and turning up and doing the work. You know,
Yeah.
I'm really not afraid of the work. It's hard. Can be really hard. Hard as in quite brutal, like the conflicts that arise or the disagreements, the disappointments in not moving quicker. You know, this idea of incremental change. But by gum, I turn up. You know, I turn up and I do the work and I take actions and all of that, and I'm very proud of that. I think. Yeah, what else would I say? I think as well, I guess in terms of like more fireworks, I am really proud about being involved in the big gathering events, the network building events. In 2023, we did two in-person events, one in London and one in the northwest of England. Um, and particularly the one in the northwest, we were at this place called Greenslake Community Farm. It's a wonderful story of a local authority running this community farm and then getting in touch with their local transition town as it happens and says, we can't run the farm anymore. Do you want it? Brilliant, you know. Do you want it? And of course, there was more to the story than that, but essentially that was it. And so they've run this community farm. They have a big straw bale building on there. They do lots of work with people recovering from addiction, from people coming out of prison, young people groups, school groups, um, uh, yeah, all kinds of stuff. And it was so wonderful to be there with about 70 people who were involved in transition from around the northwest, um, and do some really good work, really good relationship building work, really good imagining what we could do together as a network. And then on the first day, we had some musicians. We paid musicians to come down, supported them to come down to just play some acoustic music on this balcony of the straw bale building while the sun was setting. It was such a romantic moment. They were just jamming and playing their wonderful music. And then again, more relation. It's just convivial relationship building, people talking and connecting. And that was, I can picture that now, that moment on the evening of the first day, and then we had a second day. But that was just glorious, yeah. I was very
That
proud of that.
yeah, that sounds really wonderful.
Yeah, it was great. It was, yeah, and I'll keep doing that. I'll keep bringing people together because I see so much value. After those gatherings, for me, the catchphrase is time together is time well spent. So it's almost regardless of what you're doing, like get people together, just get people together. As
Yeah, right.
Patti Smith, the musician, said, people have the power, you know, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And probably like more on the personal side. So what
Mhm.
kind of changes do you think like doing all those community and networking events has brought you? I think for me, like because a lot of my discussion on my master seminars, they are sort of like very depressing. So we're
Yeah.
like even the thing with like the green modernization we're having now, we're discussing about the colonizing pattern, the extractivism within it. So I think it's for me it's kind of a like a light in a lot of the climate discussions we have, like since I'm part of the Transition Network an international team. Yeah, I'm wondering what changes has it brought to you?
For me personally,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I used this word profound earlier, and I think it has been hugely profound for me being involved in transition. There's a what I observe is there's an abundance of things we could do, right? Because we are reinventing the system of how human beings live on this earth. Um, and that is exhausting at times, that abundance, geez, we could do anything and we need to do everything, wow, that's moving towards overwhelming. But in that sweet shop of activity, my goodness, almost everything tastes good. So for me, that profound change is relates back to what I was talking about, my epiphany, if you like, of realizing that the theatre work I was doing was one part of culture, and culture is everywhere. When we were talking about that moment that got me into transition, now I kind of look at what I could be doing, or look out the window, quite literally and metaphorically, and see my local community and think, goodness me, if I'm connecting on an interpersonal, relational level, um, celebrating the culture that is us living in this area, as well as the more than human world that lives around us, um, then I could do anything. It's sort of like a superpower. You start imagining into what's possible as opposed to how crap everything is, how bad everything is. If you imagine into what's possible, it's like a superpower. Like that's a well of a resource that you can always draw on. And even if you feel tired or feel like you're burning out, there's people out there to help. There is also the superpower of community. Yeah, the superpower of community. There's people and places there that can resource and hold you when you need picking up, when you need a bit of time just to go, I need to just take a break and all of that. If you're in relationship with your local community, I'm getting really excited about this now. If you're in relationship with your local community, the community will catch you and hold you while you're resourcing yourself. And then when you're ready, the community will catch the next people who need resourcing, right? So yeah, the and that's enormous. I was deeply in a theatre making community before, but that touring theatre making community, the clue is in the word touring, right? We came and kind of brought our show to town. We were there for one night to a week or 2 weeks, and then we left again. And we were, for me, a lot of the shows were saying some really cool stuff. We're entertaining people, they're provocateurs, right? They come to town and provoke the audience they have, and then move on. Um, now I'm really proud to say I belong to this community, and it's much more rooted. My friend Lucy talks about find where you belong, grab a spade and dig in. It's like find where your activism is. This could be again real or metaphorical. Find where your activism is and dig in. Um, and this is all huge change for me. Huge, yeah. It's been amazing, and long may it continue.
Yeah. Well, that is really well said, and I can definitely tell how much passion you hold for this community. Yeah.
Good, great. Yeah,
I'm just gonna wrap this up with a few more questions.
sure.
So, if there's like one message you want to tell the people who are watching this, what could it be?
Um, I think it would be what I've probably what I've just said. Find where you belong, grab a spade and dig in. So
Right.
just, yeah, find your place to be active and know that other people are finding their place. You don't need to carry everything. Other people will be carrying different elements of what needs to happen. So find your place and dig in.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. Like, I think a lot of times the work that I'm doing, they don't really feel like working. I just feel like it's just really good activity for me. Yeah. Oh, and also there's a small activity we do before we end the session. So we ask our last interviewee to if he has any question for the next interviewee. So we got a question from Shunru, who
Yeah.
is the founder for Transition Japan. So the question he wants to ask is, what's the happiest moment in your life? What do you really want to do, and what feels joy to you?
Oh my goodness. The happiest moment in my life. Um, the happiest moment in my life is yet to come, which is Liverpool winning the Premier League this year.
Right.
What was the second part?
What feels joy to you?
What feels joy to me? I mean, I think it is that being in relationship to your community. That's a really joyous place. And God, my mind's just expanding. It's the end of the conversation, isn't it? But into what we mean by community, I think that's a really interesting question. So when I talk about being in relationship to your community, that is could be your local community, but could also be another part of who you are, right? Could be about your identity a little bit. I just joked about Liverpool winning the Premier League. That is also part of my community. Music, oh, glorious music, is just such a resource to me. And, that's another community aspect, what resources you and so on. So I think being in relationship to your community brings me huge amounts of joy. But that could be many different things on many different levels, including this community that we're making here from China to England.
Yeah, that's a really like long relationship string.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, and do you have any question for our next interviewee? So we're gonna probably be interviewing Mary from Transition Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What would be my question for Mary? Oh, you put me on the spot here. I think I've been in some webinars with Mary, but not many. But I'd be really interested to know. Okay, so I'm going to do this. So this is a bit cheeky. But my question to Mary would be, Mary, what question should we ask you in order to get to know you better?
Well, interesting. Yeah.
So she can pick the question for herself. And this is a nice way to get to know a group better sometimes. It's a bit
Yeah.
cheeky, I know, but yeah.
Yeah, but a good one. Yeah. And yeah, that's probably the end of the interview. And thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, thank you so much again.
Well, thank you for inviting. It's been really, really fab speaking to you. And yeah, I really want to kind of turn the interview on its head and ask you all those questions.
I'm gonna
You
be
know,
really nervous now.
but yeah, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much.